Hi sewing friends, I'm Karina. This is Lifting Pins and Needles, a channel all about sewing, and today I'm excited to show you two new garments I've made for a pattern test for each to stitch. So this is a new pattern release. The name of the pattern is from a city in Slovakia, and I hope I am saying this right. I think it's pronounced Kosice, but I'm probably pronouncing it wrong. You know, Kenneth always names her patterns usually after places around the world, like cities or countries, and I think that's really cool. The features of this pattern are that it can be a top or a dress, so the difference is in the length. There is a V neckline front and back, raglan sleeves with elasticated shoulder here, buttons going up and down the top or the dress, and then for the sleeves you have two options. It's actually the same sleeve piece, it's just that one you hem normally and it results in like a flared sleeve, and the other one you hem with an elastic inside and it just brings that sleeve into your arm. So you can mix and match these sleeves to the top or the dress, or you know, you can create whatever look you want. For the dress there is also a fabric belt that you can create with the same fabric as an option. The recommended fabrics for this style are super specific, and they need to be lightweight wovens that are not drapey or not like super floppy. So the fabrics that she mentions are cotton lawn, batiste, voile, shirting, cotton, like light cottons, that sort of fabric. So my favorite fabrics like chiffon and rayon, you know, viscose, are not suitable. So I had to deep dive in my stash to find the appropriate fabric. I know a lot of people have the fabrics I've mentioned, it's just that it's not the types that I usually purchase. So, you know, I'm sure you have the appropriate fabric in your stash. The birds, yeah, they're just everywhere. Okay, they don't care if I'm filming a video, do they? The sizing for this pattern comes from 00 to 20 US. And as with all of the woven patterns for each to stitch, there are cup sizes A to double D. The bust measurements from 30 and 1/8 to 49 inches, that is a double D cup. And the hips 33 1/4 to 48 inches. The positive ease around the bust and the hips is about 4 inches. So it's a style that is not super loose nor fitted. I think it's just right. Now, the uniqueness about this pattern is the construction. I have never come across this style of construction, and for a sewist like myself who loves to learn something new and new tricks, I was absolutely happy while sewing to be doing something I didn't know how to do prior. And at this stage of my sewing, that is not easy to come by. I usually can just like whip up things and figure things out, but Kenneth has me on my toes, challenging me, and I really appreciate that. So basically this top is created without a serger. If you don't have a serger, you don't need one. You don't need your overlocker. You can like go on holiday with your basic sewing machine and make this top in your hotel room. And I'm thinking, when I'm at my parents-in-law's and I have no overlocker, I could make this pattern perfectly. The finishing inside is beautiful. So the raglan sleeves, the side seams, the center back seam, they are all finished with French seams. And then the other unique feature is the way the neckline is finished with bias binding, but in a totally different and new way. And I'm so excited about this new technique. I'm planning and thinking of ways to adopt this technique for the future in other projects. So I'll stop blabbing about all the sewing nerdiness that I love, and in Up Close and So Personal, you're going to see a lot of sewing as well. So let's hop into that. What you are going to see is a myriad of things in this Up Close and So Personal. First, some basic fit modifications I need to do to the pattern, the layout in 1 yard of fabric for the top, the neckline construction front and back, which is very unique, French seams, and the sleeve construction. First, we're going to start by making the typical fit adjustments I need to make for most patterns, which is dropping the bust dart and lengthening the top, because I'm usually taller than the drafted height. So I use a C cup as always. I cut out the rectangle for the dart, drop it down 1 inch, fill that little gap with paper, same as there on the lengthen and shorten line, slash it at 1 inch, and that will give me the fit that is intended for my height. Now let's look at the layout I made for a size 12 hips. In a non-directional print, I can whip it out of a yard basically. The front and the back are both placed there on the fabric right to the edge. None of these are on the fold, and the sleeve is flipped. It's non-directional. Those are the two binding pieces that are cut on the bias. And you can see I've cut it out of 90 centimeters, which is a yard. Now, the binding for the neckline is something new that I've learned, cool new technique. These little strips are cut on the bias. There's 2 for the front, 2 for the back. Now, on the extremes of these, there are letters there that reference to letters on the pattern pieces for the front and the back, and I'll go into detail about that. Now, these pattern pieces you need to fold and press really carefully without stretching, wrong sides together. So there I'm showing you letters K, J, M and P, which correspond to the pattern pieces front and back. I've marked that with friction pens. Those come off when you iron. So let's look at the back first. The back has reference letters J and K as guides. So you take those little strips that you've already pressed and you match them up to the back of the neckline there, matching the letters. You're seeing that right sides of the top to the right sides of those little binding strips, and these need to be sewn on with a 3/8 seam allowance. That is what I'm doing right now. After I've sewn this with 3/8 seam allowance, I need to do some understitching, flip that seam allowance towards the left. I use my edge for on the sewing machine always for these types of things because it gives me a really sharp, neat finish, really straight sewing that I might not achieve if I just use the normal presser foot. After I've done that understitch, I have a bit of bulk there of the seam allowance, as you can see. That needs to be trimmed off. So grab my scissors and trim off that seam allowance to have it close to the stitching line. Not that close, but you know, just chop it off in half. After I've done that, I can fold this binding towards the wrong side of the top and pin it and sew it on. There you can see me putting some pins. That understitching will keep the binding towards the wrong side of the top so it won't be seen on the visible area on the right side of the top. I have already a row there of the understitching, and now I need to do another row to secure this binding onto the neckline. And so I'm just using my normal foot there, going really nice and slow to get a really straight seam. You can see 2 seams on the inside, but on the outside there's just 1. Now for the front, it's similar but a little bit different. The front uses M and P as the letters to guide yourself to place those little binding strips. There is an area that has been interfaced and folded in towards the wrong side of the top. The bust darts have been sewn. Now this front piece there, the interface part, has to be folded now towards the right side of the fabric. So it looks like an accordion, as you can see there. I've pinned that in place, do that on both sides, and now I can start pinning, and I've already pinned the top there of that binding strip onto the neckline, matching the M, that is the letter of reference there. So I can pin that to the center of the front. As you can see right there, it doesn't reach all the ends because that is going to be inside that little band for the buttons. So there are notches there to guide you up to where that strip has to reach. So that 3/8 seam allowance, and magically that's been done on both sides, as you can see there. Now I need to understitch that exactly the same as I did on the back and follow the same steps. So I'm just quickly whizzing past the understitching here. So the same as I did to the back part of the binding, I am doing to the front, understitching there. And then I'm going to do the same seam allowance, trimming, folding it towards the wrong side, and top stitching. And you're going to see that the binding is sort of on the inside of that button band, as you can see there. That's how it looks when it's finished. Super clean on the outside with 1 stitching line, and on the inside you have 2. Super clean finish. What about these French seams? Now that both necklines have been done, I'm going to show you the French seams. They are done everywhere, but I'm just showing you this seam. The first step is sewn with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, and the second with a 3/8, giving you a total of 1/2 inch. So I've placed my back pieces wrong sides together, as usual, as you do on a French seam. And I'm going to sew that first step with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. I use my 1/4 inch foot to get a really neat result. After sewing that, you need to trim that seam allowance more into about half so that all that is enclosed within the second step of the process. You can see there I've pressed everything, I've folded that really neatly, and now I need to do the second step that is done with a 3/8 seam allowance. I also do this with a presser foot to keep it really nice and straight there. I really love my presser feet. So I'm sewing that with a 3/8 seam allowance. That gives you a total of 1/2 inch seam allowance. That is what this pattern has. When you get to the top there, it can get a bit bulky where all that binding is. You have to be really careful that they match at the top there so you don't have a wonky V neckline. You can see that matches there. And then that French seam is done. And this is the same seam you do for the raglan sleeves and the side seams everywhere. So the finishing side is super mega neat. Super neat, super well done. You don't need a serger for this. The raglan sleeves have elastic on the shoulder, and I'm going to show you. They give you a measurement of an elastic that you cut into 2. I have my 2 pieces there. I've marked the middle of those. And from the edge inwards, you mark a line at 5 centimeters. So you end up with 3 lines on your elastic. And these lines match the notches that the raglan sleeves have on the top. That notch matches that one. The middle one matches that one on the elastic, and that one matches that one on the sleeve. So then you go ahead and pin those. Now you need to put the settings on your machine to a zigzag stitch with a wideish length at 3. And I've done that with my sewing machine. And then you have to go stretching that elastic as you sew the zigzag stitch, the elastic onto the raw area of the sleeve. So this is tricky. You need to stretch out that elastic. Is full capacity of stretch basically to go sewing this onto the raw area of the sleeve on the top. There is going to be a little bit of extra elastic on the sides there that you just need to trim out. You don't need that. Once this is done, now you need to fold your top part of the raglan sleeve twice. I'm going to show you here how I fold it once, and then I fold it twice, and then I pin it. That needs to be stretched as you're sewing. You sew through the elastic, through everything, and then magically it's already done on the other sleeve. You can see how the result is really good, really clean, really finished, and this is going to bring the shoulder in and give a really comfy fit on the neckline, and it's part of the design feature, and I think it's really cool. So for the test, I was assigned just to make a top. You know, for a test, you're just meant to make one garment, right? Now, because I'm naughty and I know these patterns fit me, I don't make a muslin. This is my wearable muslin. It's perfect. And I chose a really nice fabric to go along with it. I don't recommend doing that. But because I've sewn so many of these patterns and I know exactly what I need to do, and you saw the fit adjustments I made were very simple. Drop that side buster, lengthen the top. That is usually all I need to do. So this is my first one. This fabric is a mystery fabric. I do not know what it is. But if you saw up close when I was sewing, it looks like linen. It is not linen. It's some sort of polyester blend thing. I have no idea. You can see the texture of it. It looks exactly like rayon linen blend, but it's not. By the way it frays and everything, it was polyester. But it's nice. It's got the structure and the weight that the pattern requires. It's not thick, and you don't want thick fabric because all these little areas of the French seams can get a bit bulky. So yeah. So there you can see that neckline. I've shown you how to sew, how it's united there at the back center seam with the French seam there. The elasticated shoulders that make it so comfortable, and the neckline is perfect, like there's no gaping. The V neckline on the front, V neckline on the back, center back seam that you can't see because of my print, and then the elastic at the hem of the sleeves there. Now I measured the elastic to just be just right, so it doesn't actually like hug my arm. I would not like that. But that's up to you to decide how much elastic you want to put in there to make it comfortable, you know. I put a lot of extra buttons. I usually do that with button downs. If the pattern says 6, I'll put 10 because I like having a lot of buttons. These are 3/8 inch buttons. I'm going to turn it inside out so you can see the French seams. Okay, I only showed you the center back French seam, right? But the raglan sleeves also have French seams. So maybe you can see that seam right there. The difference I make with French seams have a curve because raglan sleeves have that curve, you know, towards this. These are raglan sleeves, you know, it's curved. So when I do the first stitch at 1/4 inch, I trim that and I do little clips to allow this to turn really well before pressing it towards the other side and doing the second step of the seam. So that just allows this area here to press nicely and turn the curve. So I do that extra step. So once you've sewn in the raglan sleeves, then you did the side seams. They also have French seams. I hope you can see what I see right there. A very clean finish inside. Everything, there's no raw seams anywhere. Everything's neatly enclosed. There where the buttons go, this is folded in twice. So it's like an integrated facing sort of thing that turns into a button band, you know. I just love the construction. What I was learning new was this binding technique. I just find it brilliant. I love it. Here you can see my top on with a green skirt in a more formal styling way. See the length of the top is at sort of mid-hip where I like it to be. I lengthened it by an inch to account for my height. Here you can see the neckline. It's quite modest. That V neckline doesn't show any cleavage or anything, but super flattering. There you can see me stretching out those shoulders and that hem with the elastic. All very comfortable, super comfortable. Here's the V neckline at the back, which I think is very unique in a design. I really like that. Everything around the neckline fits beautifully. I really like this top. And yeah, I'll just show you up close again at the center. I put a lot of buttons. I usually put lots of buttons about 2 inches apart.
Don't you think this is starting to wear on me? You've been raining down like hail. I'm weak. I have tried to give you my soul, but you can't love something you own. It's too late to repair what we made.
Okay, so there's a dress option, and I thought about it and took a deep dive in my stash again to see if I could find another appropriate fabric, because that one I've just shown you was a bit hard for me to find it. I have a big stash. I've never shown you my stash, have I? Yeah, it's quite big. Anyway, I found a cotton, an embroidered cotton, lightweight, perfect, and I did not know how I didn't find it the first time I went around to have a look in there. So I made the dress. I couldn't help myself. This time the only difference was that I made a dress, so it's longer, and I didn't do the elastic on the hem of the sleeves, and you're gonna see why when I show it to you. Now the only fit adjustment I made for the dress, and you can see that now, was that I shortened the dress by 3 inches. There are 3 shorten and lengthen lines in different areas of the pattern, sort of here, then down there, and then there's another one on the skirt area. And I sort of measured and figured out that the original length of the dress was going to be sort of midi length for me. I didn't want a midi length, so I shortened it by 3 inches so it would hit me right above my knee. And that's the only fit adjustment I made for the dress. The size I chose for my dress is a 12 C cup. That is what I always make. So at the bust, the waist 12, and then I blended out to a 14 at the hips. That is the size I chose. So enough teasing. Here is my black embroidered cotton. Isn't this fabric so awesome? Look at it. It's got all those little white thingies embroidered onto the fabric. So on the wrong side, the embroidery is like more bold, and on the right side it's more faint. I chose this side as the right side. I could have chosen either or, but I wanted the embroidery to be a bit more subtle. So the second time around, I already knew what I had to do. I wasn't following instructions. I knew exactly what I had to do, and the process went super fast, super easy. I think it took me about an hour and a half to sew the whole dress, aided by the fact that this has scallops. The fabric had scallops on the edge, and so I placed the sleeves to have that, you know, so I didn't have to hem. And the bottom of the dress, I didn't have to hem either. So you know, hemming takes a while, and if you don't have to hem because it's already done, it's a huge time saver. So this is a win in every sense, because it looks amazing, it looks awesome, unique, and you don't have to hem. So win. just a win, you know. I'm so glad I paired this fabric to this dress. So it's the exact same thing. I put in a lot of buttons, the same as I did to the top. I put those buttons that have white and black. I think they look really cool. I think there's 16 buttons down the dress. I think it took me longer to sew on the buttons than to actually sew the dress. The difference I did with this dress was that the binding, I cut it out of a contrast cotton that I had, very thin, lightweight cotton, to make the binding on the neckline here. This is the back and this is the front. Now Kenneth actually recommends in the instructions to use a contrasting fabric for the binding if your main fabric is a little bit bulky. This was the case. Not that the fabric was bulky, but the embroidery might have made the binding bulkier, like more thickish there to sew on. So I opted for that, and it's very clean, very neat, same, you know. Here you can see the dress on. Look at the length, and that scalloped hem I think is really nice. I didn't have enough of this fabric to make the belt with the same fabric, so I'm just wearing one of my normal belts. I do have a collection of belts. There are all the buttons there, lots and lots of buttons. I think from far away the fact that they're white stands out and makes it look really nice. I like the way the embroidery looks on this pattern, all those little wavy features. I think is really cool. I'm super happy with the fit and the sleeves of this dress. Here you can see a bit more on the top part of the dress, that V neckline, super modest. I just love it so much. Look at that V at the back, it's just so unique. I love it. What can I say? I really like the sleeves as well. There is that elasticated bit I've shown you with the other one as well, and the buttons, that sleeve, and those scallops are just everything.
Time flashed by and I woke up on the other side of the moon. The sun don't rise, all the light is gone from me and you. Time flashed by and I woke up on the other side of the moon. The sun don't rise, all the light is gone.
As usual with these patterns, I'm thinking what else can I do, because I've actually haven't deviated from the pattern, as it is a test, you know, with the top and the dress versions. I've made them as you're supposed to, but I'm thinking what else can I do. And I think when it turns into summer and the weather starts getting better, this could also be like a halter top. So if you omit the sleeves and bind this and put ties on the top, you can have those like halter tops. You know, those ones that just come up here and then tie up here on this area. You need a special kind of bra to wear those, and I do have them because I do like that style of tops. I think I'm going to make this pattern again doing that. So omitting the raglan sleeves, binding all this area here around there, and then making those bindings longer and like a little tie on the top. I think would be a really cute alternative to use this pattern again in a different way. Although I'm going to make this again, and I'm going to adopt this binding technique now. I think I've been trying to think how else can I use it, and I'm super excited to have learned something new, and that is always very motivating for a seamstress like me. I really like learning something new. This pattern is on sale through Sunday the 28th. It's 20% off, and if you like this style and want to give all these techniques a go, you can purchase through the affiliate link down in the description box. And I always mention it for transparency. If you purchase through there, I receive a small commission from that sale, and that helps support what I do in this channel. That is what I wanted to share today. Please subscribe, like, and share, and I will see you very soon. Bye.